Hello, sippers. I'm Martia.
I'm Demetrius.
And I'm Renee.
And welcome to this week's episode of Sip and Unwine True Crime Podcast. Hey, ladies. Hey, sippers.
Hey, ladies. Hey, sippers.
Hey, ladies.
How are y'all?
I'm good.
That's good. I have no complaints on my end either.
All right.
We're just here for another episode. I'm happy.
Right. Exactly.
True Crime Tuesday.
Our favorite day of the week. Yep.
All right.
So, sippers, if you didn't already know, although we are a true crime podcast, we also discuss many other topics. So please make sure you keep listening after our case discussion because we have a few other segments you don't want to miss. Okay, ladies, so let me tell the sippers what we're sipping on for this episode.
Yes, let them know.
We've got Jaeger bombs on deck tonight, and they're actually pretty good. So the Jaeger bomb recipe is pretty simple. It's 2 parts to this drink, and I'll make sure that it's posted on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter pages so you sippers can either make this drink or come up with your own drink, but you're going to need something to drink when you listen to this episode.
Uh-oh.
Are you ladies ready for this one?
Man, let me get one more, and then I'll come right back.
All right.
It's like this is going to be a heavy hitter.
I don't know. I'll let you all determine that. But
Okay.
I will say that, like, we normally say this anyway, but it's definitely a doozy, ladies. So,
Oh, no.
yeah. All right, Sipper. So just to let you know, this is our last episode for the season. We're going to be on a break for about a month. So make sure when you get finished listening to this episode that you go back and get caught up on any of the episodes that you may have missed from season 1 and season 2.
Or if you're listening to this and it's past that month, you can just go ahead and jump into season 3. Just go on and hit the next one after this one.
That part. All right. So this case that I'm going to discuss today is going to take us back to the summer of 1990 and over to Seattle, Washington. And this case discussion is about George Waterfield Russell Jr. Have you ladies heard of him?
I've never heard of him before. Not that
No.
Okay. So yeah, this monster has been featured on several shows on the Oxygen and ID channels. Now, before I begin speaking on this case, I do want to acknowledge the people that these crimes have left a lasting impact on. We want to send our heartfelt sympathy to not only the survivors, but also the loved ones and friends of all the victims we are about to discuss. Before I get started, I want to share the names of the 3 victims in this case. Mary Ann Polrich, age 36, Carol Marie Beath, age 24, and Andrea Randy Levine, age 27. George Waterfield Russell Jr. was born in April 1958 in the state of Florida. George's parents separated when he was still a baby, and George's mother, she was young and she wanted to go to college, so she actually, I hate to say abandoned, but she kind of did abandon her baby and left George with his grandmother from around the age of 6 months all the way up to his early middle school years. When he was about 11 or 12 years old, his mother came back to get him when she was getting ready to get remarried to a doctor. When she remarried, she also had a new baby girl. She took George and her new family and they moved to a place called Mercer Island, Washington. So George had a new baby sister he had to get used to. He was settling into a new state and he was trying to get attention from his mother and father, but to no avail. So his mom and dad were basically paying way more attention to the baby than they were paying attention to George. So he starts acting out. George was actually, right, yeah. So they say George was pretty popular in school, but he didn't care about school popularity. He wanted that same level of attention from his mom and stepdad. Eventually, George became isolated, started wearing dark clothes. He also began breaking into neighbors' houses while their families were sleeping inside. While he was breaking into those houses, he would steal jewelry, take cash, and also personal mementos from those different houses. But one thing that stood out in some of these crimes is that he would also stand next to the bed of sleeping women and just stare at them. And
oh, no.
Yeah, so
that's creepy.
Isn't that creepy?
Starts off that way.
Right. I don't know how they discovered that he was doing that. I'm not sure if someone woke up and just saw him standing over them. Don't know. But investigators would later conclude that that was the beginning of George's perverted sexual gratification while he was committing these different crimes. So as George was growing up, he was incarcerated at least 24 different times during his early adulthood, but mostly for minor offenses. He was able to use his knowledge of police procedure to elude arrest arrest and to also avoid conviction for many of his crimes, which I'll elaborate on that later. He had a knack for manipulating people to lie for him and also to get people to not testify against him. So even though he was arrested a lot of times and put in jail, some of those charges never stuck because he was able to get out of it. By the age of 16, George's mother...
Wait a minute, so he was punking people out when he was before the age of 16?
This is all during his early teenage years.
Goodness.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so, and again, he was, I guess, in a sense, rebelling, acting out because he wasn't getting a certain level of attention from home. By the age of 16, George was forced to live with his stepfather. Reason being, his mother actually abandoned him a second time. She left a note saying that she was leaving the family and walked out on her husband and George. Several years after...
Wait a minute. You rarely hear women doing a walk away from
Exactly. That's true.
Wow.
So I don't know what was going on in her household that second time around, but she left. George was still with his stepfather, and his stepfather would eventually remarry another woman. During that time, though, George developed an inappropriate fascination with his stepmother, and it included him spying on her. Eventually, that questionable behavior got him kicked out of his stepfather's house, and he was sent to live with some aunties. As I stated, throughout George's childhood and on into early adulthood, George had several run-ins with the law. And like I said before, they were mainly for burglaries and theft. However, back in 1971, when George was around 12 or 13, he also got in trouble for truancy. He had a history of using marijuana by that time, and he actually was stealing out of lockers while he was in school. But for his punishment back then, he was given the opportunity to work at the Mercer Island police station. So while he was there, he used to run errands for the police. He would also work as an informant, and he also befriended several officers by listening to their problems. Now, a side note, just a side note on that.
What?
Right. So a side note for me, I'm thinking about his age. Like, he was so young.
Mm-hmm.
And these officers, I'm trying to understand how they was just sitting there like venting to this little young kid or whatever.
Exactly. Like, what?
Right. But, records show that the police station basically became his second home.
I was just about to say, since he was probably arrested so much, they probably, they knew him. They felt comfortable.
Right. And I guess they were trying to get him to change his ways. So, okay, you're in trouble, but we want you to be over here helping us out. So the officers ended up becoming something like his extended family.
Wow.
But
now, that's something when the police become your family because they've arrested you so many times.
Exactly. And he was also, when they moved to this new area, George was also in the minority, so it was a predominantly white area. So I'm guessing this police force probably was a predominantly white police force, but they took this guy under their wing. But eventually George would destroy that bond he had because he would be lying and playing with the law right up under their noses. So that whole experience would soon become the basis of how George was able to make women feel comfortable while they were in his presence. Sources would also report that George was very popular with the ladies, and he was a well-known ladies' man at local nightclubs in Seattle once he got older. Another thing about George, though, is that he did not take too kindly to rejection. George used the skills he learned at the police station to help portray himself as being a police officer. So he's still out here lying, and portraying himself as a police officer was one of the ways that he was able to help get the women to trust him, talk to him, invite him into their home, etc. But one of the nightclubs that George was always going to, they found out that he was lying about being an officer, so they ended up banning him from coming into their club. So on September the 12th, 1990, George was arrested as a suspect in 3 murders. At the time of his arrest, he was actually staying with 3 college girls who knew nothing about his activities. They thought he was an officer, they thought he was moonlighting as a security guard at clubs, and when the apartment was raided, they actually led police to George's room where they found backpacks with clusters of hair that would later be identified as one of the victims.
Wow. Oh my God.
Right. So not only did they have forensic evidence linking him to the crimes, including semen samples and fibers from inside one of the victims' trucks, it was also discovered that he had a ring from one of the victims and was giving it to another woman. But that ring would later be found at a local pawn shop, which I'll get into. So the first charge was for the murder of Mary Ann Polridge. On Friday, June 22nd, 1990, Mary Ann Polridge went to a place called Papagayos, which was a nightclub nightclub in Bellevue. She was there with two of her friends. They were all hanging out. They drove in Mary's car, but they left that club at about 9:30 p.m. Early the next morning, Mary Ann's body was found inside of a dumpster in the parking lot behind a place called the Black Angus Restaurant, which was about a mile from the Papagayos Club. Mary Ann's body was unclothed and she was wearing 2 pieces of jewelry. There was also a Frito-Lay dip container lid over her right eye and forehead. Her arms were folded over her stomach, her legs were extended and crossed at the ankles, and she had a pine cone in one of her hands and was positioned as if she was lying in a coffin. Detectives would also later determine that she had been raped after her death, and that's considered a crime called sadistic necrophile. Her body had several significant injuries, but the King County medical examiner determined that the most likely cause of Mary Ann's death was manual strangulation. Mary Ann's skull fracture and numerous facial injuries appeared to have been inflicted by a fist. Her liver had 2 widely separated lacerations, and she had a distinct anal tear that the medical examiner said was caused by a solid, non-human object.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that terrible?
Oh my gosh. Oof.
Mary Ann had a blood alcohol level of 0.14% at the time of her death. What's also disturbing is that her body was discovered by one of the employees that took out the trash at that Black Angus restaurant. The victim's purse, sweater, and car were found back at that nightclub, Papagayos. The police discovered that on the evening of Mary Ann's death, George went to Papagayos with his friend, a man named Smith McLean, to have dinner. Once they were there, both of them made conversation with Mary Ann, and after dinner, George borrowed the keys to Smith's truck and told him he had to go out there and change into a shirt with a collar due to the dress code. George had a duffel bag in that truck. Now, a Bellevue officer that was working off duty at the nightclub as a doorman at Papagayos, he said he often spoke with George, who was a frequent patron of the nightclub. That night that he saw George, he saw him twice. Once shortly after his shift began at 10:30 p.m. and then again about an hour later. But on the second occasion, George told that officer that he was going to take, quote, this girl over to her place to get something. The officer would later report that he didn't see the woman well enough to identify her, but he did describe her size as being similar to the size and stature of Mary Ann, and he noticed that the woman in question seemed to be very intoxicated. The crazy thing is, George did not return to Papagayos that evening with the truck. Smith was upset, and he spent the rest of his evening waiting for George to return, but meeting him over at a place called Denny's. That was a place that it was known for the Papagayos patrons to go after they closed. But around 5:30 a.m., Smith had to finally find himself another ride home. On that next morning, when Mary Ann's body was discovered, George actually made a call to Smith McLean's residence, and Smith's sister answered. And he told her, he's like, oh, I've been looking for Smith all night, so where is he? But Smith's sister basically said, well, he's here and he's sleeping, but you can go ahead and bring the truck over. So George took the truck over to Smith's house, and he told the sister that he had to borrow the truck to take a friend home, but when he returned, he couldn't find Smith, so he ended up just keeping the truck. But during the conversation, Smith's sister noticed a reddish-orange stain on the passenger seat of the truck. Isn't that crazy? Goodness. So she's sitting up here like her wheels are turning. Mm-hmm. So when she asked him about it, he basically told her, he said, oh, I had a friend in the truck and she vomited clam chowder all over the truck and I tried to clean it up, is what he told her. So once George left, he basically walked off on foot with that duffel bag. Whatever he had in that duffel bag, he was holding on to it.
With him. Mm-hmm.
Right. By that time, Sean, Smith's sister, was saying, hey, your boy dropped the truck off, and Sean went out there to look at the truck and he smelled a very offensive odor that reminded him of vomit, or what he described as the smell of a deer that was gutted after a hunting kill. I've never smelled a deer after it was hunted and killed, but vomit is a crazy smell, but whatever else he described had to be worse. Wow. So George called Smith later on that morning with another lie, said that he himself had thrown up in the truck after drinking too much, but he did also say that he gave a woman a ride home in his friend's truck because he didn't want to be seen in that woman's Porsche. I guess she had a man or something like that. He said he didn't want to be seen with her. So he had made up a whole nother story. Now, Smith didn't think anything was unusual about the story because he said George had spoken with him previously about some woman he was talking to that owned a Porsche. But after further investigation, the police would later discover that George had been a regular customer at that Black Angus restaurant where Mary Ann's body was discovered. And he was there hanging out from about 1989 till March 1990 when he was banned from the restaurant. And George was very upset about being banned from the restaurant. So on October 11th, 1990, about 3.5 months after Mary Ann's murder, the police went back to look at that truck and they removed the interior of Smith's truck. So while the interior had been cleaned and detailed during the summer, the floor mats had not. So once they went and got those floor mats, they realized that the reason why Smith had taken them out of his car, he said that they smelled so bad. So he basically stored them in his garage. The DNA in that car would later test positive for being George's DNA, in addition to sperm and blood samples. And as they have in the article that I was reading, one negroid hair. So I've not seen the word negroid used so consistently until I did research for this case. Okay. But anyway, that hair that they describe as negroid hair, they said it was consistent with George's hair that was found in the debris that was around Mary Ann's body and the sheet that she had partially covering her body. So that's the first count. That's all the evidence they had with George on that first count. Are you all ready for the second count? Are you still with me, ladies?
Whew. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm the detective on this case. Keep going.
Yes, it's crazy. So the second victim that he was charged with her murder is Carol Beath. Carol Beath was employed as a bartender at Cucina, which was a restaurant in Bellevue. She lived in a condominium with her 2 children, and her ex-husband Paul lived nearby. On August the 8th, 1990, Carol spoke with Paul around 9:30 p.m. At 10:30 p.m., she also spoke with her boyfriend Mike Sewell, with whom she was planning to go on a vacation. At midnight, she met another friend at the restaurant where he was the bartender, and shortly after that encounter, Carol left the bar at about 2:15 a.m. At 4:30 a.m., Carol's daughter Kelly heard someone in the hallway of their family home, and she then saw the person shining a flashlight in the bathroom, in her sister's bedroom, and even in her own bedroom. And Kelly didn't think much of it. She basically assumed that it was her mother's boyfriend, Mike, just walking around the apartment. So fast forward to 8:30 a.m. When Kelly woke up, she realized her mother was not up as she usually was by this time, and her mother's bedroom door was locked. So Kelly was trying to wake her mother up but didn't get any response. When Kelly went outside to try to open the sliding glass door to her mother's room, she saw her mother, and whatever condition she saw her mother in, she became scared. So she made an immediate phone call to her father, who I mentioned earlier lived right around the corner. So when he came over, he entered the room through the sliding glass door and discovered Carol deceased. Carol was lying on her back on the bed. The bedspread was pulled down to the front of the bed. Her body was unclothed except for a pair of red high-heel shoes. Her feet were together with her legs spread and knees bent. Blood had been smeared on her legs in a manner that kind of resembled finger painting. She had bite marks on her arms and a plastic wrap over her head, and the way her legs were facing, it was like facing in the direction of the front door. A rifle had also been placed resting symmetrically between Carol's legs, like kind of resting on her shoes.
Gosh.
And the firearm penetrated approximately 5 or 6 inches into her vagina. Her left arm was bent upward at the elbow while her right arm was bent down at the elbow, nearly touching her hip. Not only, like I said, her head was covered in a plastic bag, but it was also covered with a pillow. Then
he did a lot to pose these bodies afterwards.
He did, right. So sick. And in this case, there were some small knife wounds that were done like in patterns on her body that appeared to have been inflicted after her death. There's a name for that, and it's an uncommon necrophilic perversion known as Piccurism. Picquerism. That kind of, like, thinking about that, it's like, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To imagine that he kills his victims.
I mean, he actually took time, though.
Took the time to pose them and then play around with them, whether he raped them afterwards or using this knife and doing it. Just was like, I just couldn't believe I hadn't heard about this case. as many episodes as that have been covered.
I'm glad I didn't before. Goodness.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
Sick. Goodness.
Very sick. The medical examiner would later determine, or they ascertained, that Carol's death had been caused by head injuries. The head injuries were inflicted by an instrument swung with considerable force. The blows to her head left distinct Y-shaped marks and crushed the entire left side of her skull. Carol had also been struck many times with a knee or a fist in her torso. Her ribs were also broken and her liver was lacerated. That's like complete overkill. But what I also found disturbing was that he did that and the kids didn't wake up. Like, I'm glad that he didn't do anything to the kids. That's A. But also the fact that I'm pretty sure these victims put up a fight. So that's just terrible. But later testimony would suggest that Carol and George were actually acquaintances. One witness testified that both George and Carol frequented the Denny's that I mentioned earlier in that first case. A waitress at the Black Angus testified that on at least 2 occasions she was talking to Carol about a quote situation between herself and George, while George was also in the establishment glaring over at them. So whatever the incident was, it occurred before George was eventually banned from that Black Angus place. And after the murders, George would later tell his friends that yes, he knew the victim and that she was a bartender at the Cucina restaurant in Bellevue. Now, when Carol's body was found, she had rings on her right hand but not on her left hand. At the time of her death, she owned 2 wedding ring sets, one that was from her mother and one that was from a previous marriage. And those rings were kept in a jewelry box in her bedroom, but they were never located after her death. During the investigation, the police published photographs of the rings in a local newspaper. At the trial, one of the state's witnesses testified that George tried to sell him some rings that resembled that missing set. Carol's family also informed the police that she had half a dozen small Crown Royal bags in the top drawer of her dresser, and in those bags she was saving up silver dollars and other change from tips. When police allowed her ex-husband Paul to re-enter the house after the investigation, he noticed that those Crown Royal bags were missing. So how about about 3 weeks later, after Carol's murder, George and one of his friends drove to a wooded area on Mercer Island, the area where he frequented and where he lived, and he told his friend that he had to pick up some money. And George got out of that car. Yes, you already know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
So George got out of that car and returned with a bag full of silver dollars and change. Now, the crazy thing is, forensic evidence didn't reveal any of George's fingerprints in Carol's home at all, but they did find an impression of a fabric glove that was left on the sheet of her bed, suggesting that perhaps the murderer wore gloves. They reference again negroid hairs were also discovered on Carol's bed sheets, underwear, and pillow, but unfortunately those fragments of hair were not suitable for forensic comparison. George would eventually plead innocent to all these charges, by the way.
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah, pretty crazy that he would plead innocent to all these charges, but one of his reasons for pleading innocent is that he tried to say, no, y'all gathered evidence, y'all tampered with evidence, y'all gathered it in an inappropriate fashion, y'all didn't handle it right. Because, like I mentioned earlier, he learned a lot during his time volunteering for that police force. So I'll go back to that a little bit later. So the third victim is a woman named Andrea Levine. Andrea Levine, she rented a basement apartment in the home of Robert Hayes and his wife. On Thursday, August 30th, 1990, the Hayes, they both saw Andrea after she returned home from work. Later that evening, Andrea went out to meet her boyfriend at a local restaurant where they were discussing plans to go out of town to the San Juan Islands. Andrea declined a ride home, and instead she drove herself home and got there probably about 1:30 a.m. and started to pack. Now, that next morning at about 5 a.m., Robert Hayes and his wife woke up to let the dog out. Dog went out back, but the dog immediately started barking and going crazy. When Russell went outside to investigate what his dog was barking at, he said he saw a dark figure about 25 to 30 feet away. He said it was dark, so he couldn't really see the person, but he could conclude that it was an adult based on their form and their shadow. When Robert called out to the person, that person fled the scene. Robert did chase the person down, but then he had to stop when he realized, wait, I'm unarmed. So he said he just stopped chasing the person, went back home, and he called the police. Robert said the police immediately did come out and they did examine the yard, but what they didn't do was check on Andrea in her apartment. The following Monday, basically 3 days after anyone last saw Andrea, Robert's wife went into Andrea's apartment because she noticed that one of the cats that Andrea had seemed to be hungry. So she went in the apartment, started walking down the hallway, and the landlord said she smelled something like old blood coming from the bedroom. She opened the bedroom door and discovered Andrea's body. The victim was laying on her back on the bed. Her face was turned toward her left shoulder. Her legs were spread with her knees straight. Her right arm extended above her shoulder while her left arm rested by her side. Under Andrea's left forearm was a book titled More Joy of Sex, and also a plastic dildo was partially inserted into the victim's mouth.
In the mouth?
Oh, so horrific.
So
this man
disturbing.
Yes.
So disturbing. The medical examiner determined that Andrea had died from severe multiple head wounds that were inflicted with an object such as an iron bar. Her body was covered with post-mortem stab wounds. So we've seen that before in the other victim. So it's like, that's just so sick. It's like he murders the victim, but then doing that still wasn't enough. That is just, it's hard to just stomach.
Seems like he spends a whole bunch of time with them after he kills them.
Exactly.
The stuff that he's doing takes time.
Right. So, so forensic evidence would later reveal the presence of what they say another negroid hair, but this time it was pubic hair at the crime scene. Now, the hair couldn't be matched to any samples that had been taken from George later, but they also couldn't exclude George from being the match to that sample. Also, just like with the other crime scenes, no fingerprints could be found, so that suggested to police in this particular case that the crime scene was wiped down. Later during George's trial, the state presented evidence showing that George and Andrea knew each other. Allegedly, on one occasion, Andrea's boyfriend drove her home in her truck and George followed in the boyfriend's car. So he made friends with all these different people in the community. A few weeks later, George and some friends drove out to a place called Renton, and they went out there to help Andrea put a new battery in her truck. George rode back to Kirkland with Andrea after helping her with that battery. So, these women trusted George. Now, what the extent of the relationship was with him is debatable because witnesses say, yes, he did know the victims. There's no debating that. But what was the extent of the relationship?
Did they go beyond acquaintances or have like a relations or anything? Okay.
Right. And in the third occasion with Andrea specifically, Andrea was at a bar with George and he came over to talk. So it was just basically claim after claim that he was friendly with these women. But after Andrea's murder, George would make all these disparaging remarks about her, claiming that she slept around, saying that she used men, and he would even call her a whore.
Wow.
Terrible. So on the Labor Day weekend after Andrea was killed, George and some friends went to Canada. On August 30th, the night before they left, the group stayed at a motel. George ended up leaving during the night. He was dressed in dark pants, white tennis shoes, a dark blue sweatshirt, and a dark cap. He told his friends something about him having to go to work. He returned at about 6 a.m. wearing the same clothes. The kicker was George didn't have a car at the time, and Andrea lived about a mile from that motel by car, but it was even a shorter distance if he would have walked. So a friend of George would later testify that she received a ring from him several days after Labor Day. That same friend went on to say that she wore the ring several times, but then she decided to give it to another friend, and that friend decided to pawn the ring. Police were able to retrieve that ring from the pawn shop, and Andrea's sister-in-law would later identify that ring as being one that she had given to Andrea as a gift. Police also brought the ring to a jewelry store where two employees were able to identify that ring as one that they had worked on for Andrea for repairs earlier back in February 1990. George was eventually arrested on September 12, 1990, several days after that third murder, the murder of Andrea. His arrest was based on some outstanding misdemeanor warrants, but after interviewing him, the police would charge him with the murders of Marianne Polrich, Carol Beath, and Andrea Levine. And as I stated earlier, George would plead innocent to all the charges.
Okay.
He would also later admit to investigators that he owned some books on Ted Bundy, but he denied being a fan of Ted Bundy's.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. So he volunteered that information himself, like, hey, I've got some Ted Bundy books, but that doesn't make me guilty. So yeah, just to kind of give a little bit more of a backstory, investigators called an expert to come in because these crimes were so sexualized. And once they did examine those murders, they did determine that they were definitely the work of one man. And initially the expert said that the serial killer would be a young white male. But then when police ended up focusing on George, they saw that he grew up in a white upper middle class neighborhood. He, quote, acted white, and the challenge was because he didn't really fit the bill of someone who would commit those crimes, they did have somewhat of a challenge trying to connect him.
I thought they found the hair.
They did find the hair, but some of the hair, it was at least 2 crime scenes where the hair couldn't be matched up to being his. So they just knew it was, okay, somebody African American, but in at least 2 of the crimes, they couldn't match that hair to him. They could match it from one crime scene. Yeah. So experts would label George as a violent necrophile and say that he justified his killings by convincing himself that the 3 women that he murdered deserved to die for some reason. And whether it was an insult, whether someone had taunted him, whether someone rejected him, the experts said that through George's eyes, those were vile and the women misused their sexuality. They compared that action to the same thought process he had towards his mother and his stepmother.
Right. That's exactly what I was about to interject.
Yeah, that is so crazy.
Yeah. Since I'm studying the little research that I have done on past episodes, a lot of psychiatrists and doctors are stating, when crimes of that nature happen to women, they're taking it out on the victims because of their abuse or neglect of a mother figure.
Terrible.
So as you were describing their bodies and how he left them, in my mind, his thought is, hey, let me, hurt my mom. But you're really hurting a complete stranger or someone that you know.
Exactly. And the significance of it all, like posing them a certain way, putting a pine cone in someone's hand, like it's just, I can't even wrap my mind around it. But the experts said that his victims essentially became surrogates to the women who he felt snubbed him when he was a child. Just like how we just, were talking about. It's terrible.
He was neglected not once, but twice. And
exactly.
A third time. So.
Yep. And then apparently, just going back to his early childhood, that, his grandmother mistreated him when she had him in her custody, according to reports. So because they were what he told himself they were in his own mind, experts say that he convinced himself that those women needed to suffer. Experts said that George would get pleasure, though, when he was able to basically abuse the corpse. So when he was beating them with whatever instruments, whether it was the iron rod or a baseball bat, when he was smashing their skulls, even though the victims, they all had basically died instantly, he was getting off on the physical act of killing them and destroying their bodies and posing their bodies and getting sexual gratification from all of the above as well. That prolonged violence, they said that turned him on some kind of way. So
horrific. That is horrifying.
It is, and I can't even wrap my mind around that thought process. I've actually, this is probably my first case where we're talking about a situation where the accuser was like sexually turned on by the crime in some way. So yeah, that I've just never even seen this in detail before. But the experts say that these murders would not have been able to happen if George, the accuser, wasn't able to actually talk bad about them, pose them into those positions, and degrade them. Like that was all also a part of him getting his revenge. The experts said that there's a pattern that came with these cases, and they were able to tie them into it being one person. So there were just several points that I'll go over that led them down the road of figuring out that George was the person. So he left the victims in a place where they would easily be discovered in order to basically stun the people who found them. Because even when you think back to the fact that he dumped a body in the dumpster, that wasn't enough. He had to pose her and do all these different things. So the fact that he did pose the women in a sexually degrading and vulnerable manner, and when he would take the sex toys and place them in certain ways and leave in the book with one of his victims. Also, he committed crimes within a place that he was familiar with. So he frequented all these different places where he encountered these victims. And he showed a increase in his ability to kill without getting caught. So it's good that they caught him after these 3 murders. However, I just kind of felt like as I was doing the research that he probably has other victims out there. But they did discover that he was actually able to catch a couple of the victims off guard. And with each person, it's almost like the crime was getting more vile with each crime. So many of those different factors made them zero in on him. But, investigators did say if he hadn't been apprehended, who knows how long he would have been on that killing spree and how violent it would have been.
And these were like people he knew, right?
Yes, he had
so
an
how
encounter
many more personal
with all
interactions and people would you have taken out? I'm glad he got caught too.
Yes. So people who knew George, they actually said he was a wonderful guy. Some that knew him said that he showed little emotion. He didn't really show any guilt when he would get in trouble about things. And they did say they noticed he had a hostility towards women. People that knew him also said that he was obsessed with sex and claimed he would hit on and make moves on anyone. Basically, he didn't really have a type. And so George would later be labeled as the charmer for the way he charmed various women. Friends would later testify that George actually cut out pictures of the first two victims from newspaper articles, and he would tell people they were quote unquote skanky sluts. And he would brag to police that they would never find the killers of those women. So obviously he was still kind of tied into different police force members. And as I stated earlier, he pleaded not guilty. I just can't wrap my mind around that though. But he was charged. Yes, but he was charged with all three murders, and he was found guilty on October 18th, 1991. He was given 2 life sentences plus an additional 29 years in prison. He showed no emotion when his sentence was being read out loud, and he is currently being held at the Callahan Bay Corrections Center.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
when you hear like 2 life sentences, you're like, why not 3? Why not?
Exactly.
Why not more than that? It just sounds like it's not enough for his extent of his crimes. Like you really destroyed families and oh my gosh.
Hopefully he'll never get out though.
I don't think so. I think he has tried to appeal his sentences, but of course those appeals are being denied. I do want to say my sources for this True Crime Tuesday: Murderpedia, Wikipedia, and justia.com. So after all of what we discussed, ladies, did you have any questions for me?
I mean, you did a heavy hitter for
I know, really.
The last episode of the season. This is crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty
crazy. I can't wait to see a photo. I'm ready to see his photo.
Yeah. So, ladies, I guess it's time to close the book on the case of George Waterfield Russell Jr.
Do not let him out. Let none of his appeals ever reach a judgment. No.
Ever.
All
right, ladies. So, moving into our next topic, I've got a quick little messy wind down for y'all. And we haven't done one of these in a minute. So, let me ask y'all a question.
Okay.
When you ladies see like old co-workers out and about or old classmates out and about, do y'all talk to them or do y'all just keep it moving and hope they don't see you? Does it depend on your relationship with that person? How do y'all interact with like old co-workers or old classmates that you might see at the store or when you're out and about with your family or whatever?
You want to go first, Renee?
I mean, it depends on if I know them. Like if I know them, then yeah, I'll talk. But if it's somebody who I just know of, I just make sure that we don't make eye contact, and then I kind of move all around and keep it moving.
Okay. Wow. Okay. What about you, Demetrius?
I'm such a friendly person in public. I'll speak to you, but I'm not going to engage first, though.
Oh gosh.
Most times I won't engage first because, when I'm out, I have seen several classmates. I'm going to stress that. And they'll just zoom on past me. I'm like, bitch, I know you saw me because you comment on everything I motherfucking put on the freaking internet.
I was going to say, well, maybe they didn't know that was you. Because I know I can walk right by somebody from high school. I wouldn't even know.
They know. Oh, wow. They know it's me.
For some people.
I mean, you can't miss this body,
honey. All right, man.
Well, let me tell y'all what happened to me recently. I went out to a store and I still wear a mask. So depending on where I'm going, like I don't really care about the restaurants or whatever because you're going to take it off or whatever. But when I'm out and about in stores, especially when it's like heavily populated, so this was like a sale day for this particular store, so I wore my mask. And I heard a voice that sounded real familiar or whatever. And I realized I was looking, at some stuff near somebody I knew. So when I looked up and saw who it was, I was like, oh, I'm gonna just say her name was Marie.
Okay.
I was like, oh, hey Marie, how you doing? Marie,
what was you looking at though? That's what I want to know.
Were you looking at Adam and Eve store or?
Why y'all always got to go left? No, we was looking at like some cosmetics, body care stuff. Yeah. Oh. So it wasn't in no shop like that. No. So I look over and I'm like, what did I say her name was? Marie? I can't remember what I said.
Marie.
I'm like, hey Marie, how you doing? And she just kept looking at the stuff and never really looked up.
And you called her name loud enough for her to hear her name being called.
Mind you, we're damn near next to each other. That's why I heard her voice. So I pulled my mask down because she kind of like glanced up a little bit. She was with her kid, by the way, too. And her kid is grown now. So her kid kind of looked back at me and kind of gave a little smirk or whatever, a smile, like a little friendly smile. But her mama, when I pulled my mask down a little bit, I said, hey, it's Martia. She said, I know who you are. And kept looking at.
Are you serious?
The shade.
And kept looking at the stuff that she was looking at.
Wow. The shade.
So I was just like a little taken aback. However you say the word. Because I've already told y'all who this was before we started this segment. So y'all know who this person is.
Wow.
And I've seen her out and about because we stay in the same area. So every couple of years, you're going to run into people when you live in that area.
Right, exactly.
And I run into her. I've never had a bad encounter with her.
I thought that y'all used to hang out and stuff, like with the group and all that.
And we was in the same little hangout circle. Let me just say it that way. So she and I never hung out one-on-one, but now we've talked on Facebook, we've talked in the DMs, and I'm gonna say that she has a business. So I got another question regarding running the business. So even years ago, she was giving me little tips or whatever when I was trying to like dip and dabble in that. So then I'm just like, okay, this felt a little cold compared to our previous encounters. And so I just turned around and walked away because I'm not about to try to figure out what that's about. Now, if it was one of y'all, we would have had a little exchange in the
it would have been something. Some words
because y'all know me.
Starting with the B word, like.
There you go. Exactly. Right. But since it was her, I just, turned around, walked away, started back looking at other stuff. I was just like, okay.
Well, I told you when, because we were cool in high school.
Same person?
Yeah, we were cool. Yeah, we used to, hang in little circles together and all that. I got on Facebook, I'm friending people, and I friended her, I sent a friend request for her too.
Wow.
And she denied it. I said, oh, damn.
I actually remember you telling this story.
And I was just like, I don't remember. Okay. I mean, I just was like, all right. And
it's
not like I'm missing nothing, but I was like,
horrible.
And I still want to,
maybe some people make it up in their minds like, I'm not gonna talk to this old coworker or this old classmate or whatever.
Right.
Like I said, me and her was, at least the vibes I got, we were never on that time. You know what I'm saying? Like she would respond to me on her Facebook post or whatever. So yeah, I kind of walked away like, I don't know what that was about, but let me tell you this though. If someone else saw that exchange compared to the other exchanges that she and I have had, they would say, nah, that was shady or whatever.
That was shady.
So it looks like she's seen you before you saw her, right?
Right.
And then she still went next to you or close to you. I mean, like if she didn't want to speak to you, like if she had an issue, she should have been like how I would have been and just walked the other way until you left.
Yeah.
So you mean to tell me there was no acknowledgement of you like, oh, hey.
Well, no, she said she knows who she is. That's why she didn't speak.
And like I said, in the past, on my end, it's not fake when I'm talking to people like that. If I'm gonna be fake, I'm not even gonna talk to you at all. I'm gonna walk away like how Renee was just saying. I'm gonna walk around the other way like I hope she don't say nothing to me because I've had those feelings before too. And so then my next question, not to talk about the person in a bad way, but just to see what are y'all doing with old coworkers or old classmates when y'all are out.
But I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Still on that before you move on. Yeah. So would it be that because she was kind of like in that circle, and then were you guys not inviting her to go on that outing and felt a certain way and unfriended people because of that?
She's come out like we're in pictures together, in group pictures together. Yeah. So there was one of our friends used to have her Super Bowl parties. She's came to a couple of those.
Right.
Another friend, yep, remember that. Another friend had a housewarming party. She came to that. So she would come out. So I mean, she didn't get crossed off an invite list or anything that I know of, but I know that her schedule was busy and she couldn't always make it out. And I even attended one of her birthday parties years ago and was invited to another party that I didn't make it to. And I've had another exchange where the person was kind of cold one time, and then a couple of months later, however long it was, she sees me out and then she engages with me first. I don't have drama with people. I don't have beef with nobody, especially not now. Like 55,000 years after high school, like I'm not still concerned about what you did or didn't do back then, right? Because I've been at parties and seen people from our high school and we've had conversation, not because we knew each other back then, but just because we got that certain thing in common. So here's my second question too, ladies. So I don't care who knows knows who she is or who figures out who she is. It's not a big deal to me because I'm not talking bad about her. But as a person who does have a business in the community, you're engaging with people on a regular basis. I actually, no lie, mentioned her name to someone who came to me about doing their makeup, and I was like, no, I don't really do faces anymore, but I know somebody. I named 2 people that she could reach out to, and this woman was one of them. And you don't know,
a whole recommendation.
I gave a reference,
free.
And I always have. I've always done that though. I have always been a person that will refer you if I know somebody that does something that you need. So I thought, well, I don't know what her issue was that day, or maybe she just didn't feel like being bothered. But what if I wanted to patronize her business? As a business owner, do you think people are always supposed to be on and in a good mood when people approach them?
Well, first of all, you need to separate your business from your personal, because that was kind of personal. Right. We've all known each other for years.
Acquaintances, not necessarily friends per se. Right? Because I thought about myself, now that I'm in the field that I'm in, my business is going to rely on referrals. So I'm thinking about if someone has an encounter with me that is kind of like the one I had with her, they're not going to be referring nobody to me. And I don't care how set you are in your career. But my thing is, you just never know what those type of exchanges could look like for your reputation.
And not only that, you just never know how life will redirect you and humble you, okay?
Right.
Not to say she's not humble, but I see instances where people have like a great following, and then all of a sudden the next day there's no one there.
Man, my feelings would have been hurt. Like, for me,
I felt some type of way. You know, be like, well, I didn't do anything to you, but I'm not losing sleep over it at all. Right. What I do don't pay her bills, and what she do don't pay mine. But I definitely felt like, because we all know that person and we know of her, I definitely wanted to discuss it, because to me it moves beyond the encounter and more so, well, how are we engaging with people that we haven't seen in a while? How are we engaging with business owners?
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. I think it might be something specific.
So you think it's
for
personal?
her?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's more of that general thing. It's just, I think it's something with her, that something happened that she just, of course, I guess didn't tell you or didn't speak of it. I don't know. Go look on your friends list. Is she still there?
I don't know. I didn't care to look.
She might not even be.
And she might not, right? But somebody did say,
she might have been gone for about 3-4 years, and you probably wouldn't even realize.
I think, Demetrius, me and you are kind of more in line. Like you said, you see people, you'll talk to them, but you may not go out of your way. That's me too.
My question is, one of the people that you called, I'm trying to think how to say
let's see how
was that response? You know, because she be about it.
Yeah,
what was her response?
She had a lot to say, because she's team me all day.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. So I know she about it. So
switch it up. Like, she's definitely team me all day. But yeah, that's it. Good discussion.
Oh, that kind of made me mad a little bit. I'm just like,
you know what? I'm gonna be honest.
Because y'all are my friends. That's because y'all are my friend, and y'all know how nice I am. That's
right. Like, why would you do somebody like that? And just say, hey, if you don't want to talk to them like
and
that,
then you threw the shade in front of your kid, in front of a whole other person. Like, what is wrong with you?
Really?
It's right.
Wrong. Like, what's wrong with you?
So anyway, in the discussions. All right, so moving into our last segment before this final episode of season 2 is complete. I do want to switch gears a little bit on a little lighter note before we end the season, before we end this episode.
Okay.
So I do have a spill the wine, ladies. Are y'all ready?
I don't know.
Ready.
Go ahead.
Here we go. The person writes, I'm newly married, and after our honeymoon, my husband had a group video call with his best friends. After I said hello and chatted for a bit with his friends, I excused myself to go for a walk. I decided I needed to get my raincoat because it looked like it was about to rain, but my husband and his friends thought I had already gone out. The friends started interrogating my husband about our honeymoon, and they were all teasing and laughing about it all until one of his best friends asked him if my looks were still an issue for him.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, hell to the no.
My husband told the female, this is a group of people that he's talking to, females and males. My husband told her that he loved me and that we had a great honeymoon and that I'm beautiful on the inside. And he said, you can't have it all.
Oh, damn.
Baby.
His friend insisted on wondering whether he felt like he had downgraded from his ex-girlfriend. And he said to her, maybe, but she makes me happy. All of his other friends... All of his, I'm sorry to laugh. All of his other friends on the call interjected and said that I wouldn't be too bad looking if I would just lose some weight, and my husband agreed with them. Now, nothing feels the same between us. I always knew I wasn't beautiful, but I thought that my husband liked how I looked, or at least didn't mind how I looked. I know my husband values all of my other qualities, and I know he loves me and he is very kind to me, but I don't feel good with him, and I haven't been happy since that day that I overheard his conversation. It's been 5 weeks and I just can't get over it. So, do y'all have an opinion about that?
My opinion.
I'm so heartbroken and shit
right.
to hear that.
So what I think is, one, he was talking about her looks or whatever he thought about that, her overweightness or whatever, to his friends to begin with.
Right.
To make them feel comfortable enough to talk to him about it.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like if he never said, oh my gosh, I don't think she's cute or attractive or whatever, they wouldn't feel comfortable to say, how, you know, are you getting over about her looks? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like
and for another one of your female friends to chime in at that, you know, females are already super hard on each other. So, yikes.
So that came from him.
I'm kind of heartbroken for her. Oh,
I know she already married him, so she's kind of stuck now.
No,
even though she knows that he don't like her like that.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
that's got to be hurtful though. Like honestly, I kind of was thinking, man, I don't know what I would do. Because I can't say, oh, I'm going to leave him or divorce him. They're newlyweds. They're only 5 weeks in.
Right. So you wouldn't go to that extreme, but man.
Yeah, but she already was saying, you disagree, Demetrius?
Yeah, but I mean, do you hear how he
would not divorce him, Demetrius? Stop it.
I mean, how much worse will it get if your friend
wouldn't do that though
like that now? And I heard it. What are you gonna do behind my back again?
I do agree.
Do that. Stop it.
But I agree with what you're saying though, because here's the thing: like I'm a worrywart, right? So I be thinking about, rethinking about, obsessing over, you know, like different scenarios in my head. So I immediately thought, yes, I immediately went back to their wedding. Like imagine having a whole wedding party of people that have probably talked about you and your looks to your husband, and they standing up there watching you walk down the aisle, and what's going through their head?
Exactly.
So like Renee was saying, they have to be awful comfortable with him because he talked about his wife beforehand to be asking him about that.
He was the one with the issue, not really the friends. I think it's more he was the one with the issue, and that's why he talked to his friends about it.
And that's got to be like an instant turn off, right? In the bedroom,
right?
She feeling all self-conscious, like,
man, I gotta go, man. I'm not gonna deal with that.
Wow. So you would probably have an annulment then, because it's only been 5 weeks. I don't know how soon you can get that done, but
I'm chucking deuces. Glad I know now instead of a year later, 2 years later, because that's horrible.
It is.
I don't like really stuff like that.
And then imagine the pressure that she would probably feel if she stays with him, right? If she stays, she'll probably be thinking all the time, like, oh, I'm getting dressed to go out with him, but he really don't want to be seen with me. Oh, I got to lose some weight, but for whatever reason,
or you'll start feeling like, well, what's his type?
Exactly. Or probably being concerned about maybe he's going to cheat on her later because, you know, men are visual. So that's probably going to be a reason for him to think about straying later on.
That's a good point.
Oh, that's crazy. I don't know if I would leave though, right? But my opinion would definitely be we have to have a conversation. Like, dude, I heard you on the phone talking about me.
Oh, it would get addressed, but I'm still out because, you know, mentally she's not going to be in a good space.
Exactly. If it was a friend, I would have to admit, I've actually been in a situation where I did find out that someone was talking about me and my appearance, and I don't talk to them anymore. I know that sounds so petty. Maybe.
I'm going to say what they say, but you don't want to say it.
I won't say. I won't say what they said, but.
And you know what?
But Renee actually was the one who told me what they said.
Really? Girl, you know I done told you about my remembering.
It's okay. It's okay.
And I told you. Did they say it to me?
Yeah, they did. In one instance, yep. Now I never said anything to you about this. Is probably your first time hearing this, right? I didn't cut the person off, but that was definitely one of the reasons why I started to pull back from being friends with that person. Because we all talk about people. We all talk about each other, right? But I don't know. I just feel like when you talk about certain things about a person, though, it can be really mean and come from a hurtful place, in my opinion. In order for you to say something about me in a certain way, you don't like me. You know what I'm saying? Like, you might be in my face smiling and laughing or whatever, but if you're going to use certain words to describe me, or if you're going to talk about my weight or whatever, if you're saying certain things in a mean way, not that you thought my outfit was ugly. that's minor. But for him to even allow his friends to address his wife in that manner and he didn't put them in check, nah, bruh, you don't like me. You don't like me because you're not going to allow people to talk about somebody you care about in that manner without checking them first, right? So with friends, it's a little different. But with a husband and wife, my husband would never let somebody ask him about me still
they shouldn't
being
even feel
ugly.
comfortable saying anything to him about it. So that's, that's bad too.
And now she has to be around him and them. So I don't know. I would have to do a walk away.
So yeah, that's why I measured it to like a friendship. I wouldn't have no problem either pulling back or leaving a friend alone.
Yeah, even if he addresses them and say, y'all, you know, it's already handled, they're still going to have their open discussions. Well, you brought us into it. You mentioned it.
Right.
I'm just shocked why you think, I don't know. I have to leave after hearing it. She didn't hear it secondhand. She heard it.
But the friends weren't even really talking bad about her though, right? Because they were just asking him if he was okay with it now, because clearly it seems like he said, I have a problem with that. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like the friends were saying, okay, well,
obviously they knew he got married. So
they were being, in my opinion, they were being disrespectful.
Right? Yeah.
So
I think they were being disrespectful.
We got married, so why are you still questioning?
There you go. Exactly.
But I'm saying what I'm saying is that he had to have expressed that to them over and over again enough for them to check on him and be like, hey, are you still good with that? I guess you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like they just came out the blue.
That's true.
It seems like he might have been saying it a lot.
And I agree with you on that. You know? But once he married her, though, they should not be asking him nothing about that woman's appearance because obviously he did accept it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying
he made it comfortable for them to do that, for them to feel comfortable to do that. You know,
all the more reason for her to walk away and leave.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding.
We're gonna have to have a talk about it though.
That's the problem.
Right. We don't. Yeah, I didn't ever say she should blame the friends at all. But I definitely feel like she needs to have a talk with the husband for sure.
Because he felt comfortable to respond instead of saying this is not the time or place or no. I love that woman. You didn't have to get, you know.
I mean, even if he felt that way, why would you say that?
I think we've had conversations with our friends like that. But once you go so far down the road with that ugly man or that broke man or whatever you described to me, I ain't asking you about it no more.
Exactly. Right.
So yeah, but so Renee, are you staying or are you leaving?
I don't know. I probably would stay because I mean, I would think it's an extreme to leave. I mean, like, you know, get a whole divorce because, you know, but I don't know. I would have to. I mean, if he still treated her nicely and did all the other things and you know other things, I mean, it is what it is. Everybody ain't the cutest, and it just is what it is. But I don't think I'll divorce because of he called me ugly. Especially if she says that she don't think, you know, I think all women are beautiful. And you can even no matter what you look like, you can always.
Let me go through the archives of records of our conversations over the past 30 years because you ain't exactly you. When did you start deciding that all women are beautiful?
Oh, it was recent, you know. Like, you know, like I don't talk about women's looks that much like that no more. Like I mean, I make jokes about it, but you know, like
you think you have to do what, Demetrius?
A time stamp. I'm keeping this one.
Well, no, I'm saying I changed. So no, that's fine.
Everybody, yeah, you're right. Everybody got growth.
I'm saying I was horrible when I was younger. I think about the stuff that I was doing, and I said, you know, that was just disgusting. You know, but I'm older now, older and wiser.
But I have talked about people's appearances, right? I try not to.
I was such a loner. I didn't have time to be a mean girl.
So Renee, you don't really care if people talk about you. You'll still be friends with them. I'm not saying that.
I'm saying, like, what if it's true? Like, what if it's something that's like, you know,
even if it is true though. But if that's your friend, why are you discussing?
But I'm specifically.
But I'm saying it might not even be in like a hateful kind of, you know, like some things are just. I'm
specifically talking about in a mean way though. Like, why would you want to hang around somebody that you know has talked negatively about your appearance? What is that thing that will make you say they've gone too far?
For me, it would be my limit is if I continue to hear it, then that's a problem. It's done. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good. I mean, I'll be cordial with you in public. You know,
well, I
don't have to speak though, but I'll be cordial. Well, I'm not going to, you know.
I would say when you say why even do that, I'm not going to speak for Demetrius, but you know, we have friends in common. So sometimes it's going to be hard to avoid folks that you might feel yourself pulling away from. So I don't know if you meant it in that context or not, but that would be my thought. Yeah.
Your
this is like
give me the same energy that you give Renee.
That's what I'm saying.
That I may grow up and be like her.
I know. I'm sorry,
like,
you guys. I'm just like,
you don't have to apologize, but this conversation is kind of like, I'm surprised, honestly, but
man, that's like some growth right there. Let me
like if you two,
like they do on the Apollo with the tree stump.
Everybody has opinions. Like people talk about people say stuff. Everybody's not gonna like you, and that's fine. You know, like it's not like I don't get so broken up because this person don't, because everybody doesn't like everybody, you know, and that's just life.
Man, you are such a pessimist. No, she is not right.
She
is operating off feelings right now, and she is being so negative.
You know, like people, you're not gonna mess with everybody.
Well, yeah, of course, you can't please everybody.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. So that's fine. Like I'm okay with me. So it's just like if people don't like me, it's like, okay, well, this person, but that's fine. You know, like because everybody's not gonna like everybody. It sucks sometimes. Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
It might not be, but it also sounds like a defense mechanism because you lead with that. You lead with people don't like me, so I don't care. And it's kind of like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, why do you feel like people don't like you? But
you might be right, therapist.
She detaches herself from everything, so there won't be any pain in any of that. Oh, this is fun. Renee,
this is a whole session.
You're
right here.
interesting, though. I have to say,
I know. You should study me one day. A lot of shit that I do don't make sense.
I've already studied you and made conclusions. I don't have to study you anymore. Well, ladies, that was a great spill the wine discussion.
It absolutely was.
Wow.
All right, ladies. Now is the time that we have to say goodbye to our sippers and each other.
We hate to leave.
But we gotta go. And we'll be on vacation for the next month, sippers. Make sure you catch up on all of our previous episodes, our previous seasons. If you're listening to this and we're already in the 3rd season, 4th season, or whatever, go back, listen to all the other episodes, get caught up.
Yep.
All right, ladies.
Bye,
ladies. Bye, sippers.
Bye.
She gonna fuck up the end. God darn.